Mundate biblical signs. God is rebuilding your confidence in Him. There are seasons when your confidence in God feels strong and unshaken, and there are other seasons when doubt quietly enters, when unanswered prayers create questions, and when circumstances challenge what you once felt certain about. Confidence does not always disappear loudly. Sometimes it fades slowly, almost without you noticing. Yet, there are also moments when something begins to rebuild within you. Rebuilding confidence in God is rarely dramatic. It often happens quietly, through reflection, endurance, and lived experience. God does not shame doubt. He forms strength through it. When confidence is rebuilt, it becomes deeper than before. It is no longer based only on emotion or visible outcomes, but on tested trust. What once felt fragile begins to feel steadier. What once felt uncertain begins to feel grounded again. You may notice subtle shifts within yourself. Fear weakens slightly. Trust returns gradually. You begin to rely less on immediate answers and more on quiet steadiness. Even without full clarity, you feel a renewed sense of grounding in Him. This is not blind belief. It is confidence shaped by experience. Scripture often reflects seasons where confidence was shaken before it was strengthened. Those who matured spiritually did not avoid doubt. They walked through it. And through that process, their confidence became deeper, quieter, and more resilient. God often rebuilds what feels weakened, forming strength that is not easily shaken again. Today, we will explore 8 biblical signs that reveal when God is rebuilding your confidence in Him. These signs may appear gradually, yet they reflect a deep inner restoration taking place within you, strengthening your trust and renewing your spiritual foundation. The first sign that God is rebuilding your confidence in Him appears when trust begins to return quietly, even before circumstances change. There was a time when doubt felt heavier than assurance. You may not have openly rejected your faith, but internally you felt uncertain. Prayers seemed unanswered. Direction felt unclear. You questioned whether you were truly being guided or simply moving alone. That uncertainty may have created distance within your heart. Yet gradually, something begins to shift. Nothing dramatic happens outwardly, yet inwardly you begin to feel steadier. Trust starts to reappear in small, almost unnoticeable ways. Rebuilding confidence rarely begins with visible miracles. It often begins with internal restoration. God does not always remove uncertainty immediately. Instead, He strengthens the heart within it. When trust returns before clarity does, it reveals something deeper taking place. You begin to rely less on immediate outcomes and more on quiet assurance. This assurance is not emotional excitement. It is calm conviction. You may still have questions, yet they no longer disturb you in the same way. The ground beneath you begins to feel stable again, even if the path ahead is not fully visible. There was a season in my own life when my confidence in God felt weakened. I did not stop believing, but I felt unsettled. I wondered if I was misunderstanding direction, if my prayers were being heard, if I was moving forward without true guidance. Outwardly I continued, yet inwardly I felt divided. Over time, something subtle began to change. I noticed moments where I felt calm, despite not having answers. I began to sense a quiet steadiness returning. It did not happen all at once. It unfolded gradually. I realized that confidence was not being restored through external proof, but through inner grounding. God was rebuilding something within me before changing anything around me. Scripture often reflects this quiet renewal of trust. Many who walked closely with God experienced seasons where their confidence was tested. They questioned, waited, endured. Yet, through that process, their trust deepened rather than disappeared. Confidence that has been rebuilt after doubt often becomes more resilient than confidence that has never been challenged. It becomes rooted not in emotional intensity, but in tested conviction. This is the kind of confidence that does not collapse when circumstances shift. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects restoration of internal security. When doubt weakens and trust begins to return, anxiety reduces and emotional stability strengthens. The mind becomes less divided between fear and belief. Instead of oscillating between confidence and uncertainty, you begin to feel integrated again. This integration creates resilience because your sense of security is no longer dependent solely on external confirmation. It is grounded within. You may notice subtle signs of this rebuilding. You feel less disturbed by unanswered questions. You pray without the same tension you once felt. You move forward without constantly needing proof. Trust begins to feel natural rather than forced. This does not mean all doubt disappears. It means doubt no longer dominates. Confidence begins to feel quiet, steady, and durable. God often rebuilds confidence in ways that are not immediately visible. He strengthens what was shaken. He restores what felt weakened. He deepens what once felt fragile. When trust begins to return before circumstances change, it is a powerful sign that something foundational is being restored. Confidence rebuilt in silence becomes stronger than confidence built only on visible outcomes. If you recognize this quiet return of trust within yourself, then something meaningful has already begun. God is rebuilding your confidence in Him, not by overwhelming you with dramatic proof, but by forming steady assurance within your inner life. And as this assurance continues to grow, another transformation begins to unfold, where fear that once lingered starts to lose its hold, and spiritual security becomes more stable than uncertainty. Another sign that God is rebuilding your confidence in Him appears when fear begins to lose its influence over your inner life. There was a time when uncertainty about the future created quiet anxiety within you. You may have questioned what would happen next, whether things would work out, or whether you were truly being guided. Fear often did not appear loudly. It showed itself through tension, hesitation, and the constant need for reassurance. Yet gradually something begins to change. The same uncertainties may still exist, but fear no longer dominates your thoughts in the same way. A steadier sense of security begins to replace it. Rebuilding confidence often involves weakening fear before strengthening certainty. God does not always remove uncertainty immediately, but He reshapes how you stand within it. When fear begins to loosen its grip, it reveals that your foundation is being strengthened. You begin to notice that the imagined outcomes that once unsettled you feel less threatening. The future may still be unclear, yet you are less controlled by what might go wrong. This shift reflects growing spiritual security rather than blind optimism. There was a season in my own life when fear quietly shaped many of my thoughts. I worried about making wrong decisions, missing direction, or misunderstanding what God was doing. Even small uncertainties created tension within me, yet over time, something subtle began to change. I noticed that fear no longer controlled my reactions as before. I could face uncertainty without feeling overwhelmed. I did not suddenly have answers, but I felt more grounded. That quiet shift helped me understand that confidence was being rebuilt within me. God was not eliminating uncertainty. He was strengthening my inner security. Scripture often reflects this movement from fear towards steadiness. Those who experienced doubt and challenge did not always receive immediate clarity, yet they grew in courage and calm. Their confidence was rebuilt not through constant reassurance, but through endurance and renewed trust. Confidence that grows through weakened fear becomes more resilient because it is tested rather than assumed. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects reduced anxiety and increased emotional regulation. When internal security strengthens, fear loses intensity. The mind becomes less reactive to imagined threats and more stable within uncertainty. This stability allows clearer thinking and steadier response. Instead of anticipating danger in every unknown, you begin to remain balanced. This strengthens resilience because your emotional state becomes less dependent on predicting outcomes. You may notice subtle signs of this rebuilding. Fearful thoughts arise less frequently. When they appear, they do not control your direction. You feel more capable of facing uncertainty without tension. Your inner life feels steadier, even when the future is not fully visible. This is not denial, it is restoration. God is rebuilding your confidence by reducing fear and strengthening spiritual security within you. As this fear continues to weaken, another transformation begins to unfold. Doubt that once felt heavy begins to feel lighter, and your inner dialogue becomes more aligned with trust than with uncertainty. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to reshape your inner thoughts, turning internal conflict into quiet conviction. Another sign that God is rebuilding your confidence in Him appears when your inner dialogue begins to shift from conflict toward quiet conviction. There was a time when your thoughts felt divided. One part of you tried to trust, while another part questioned constantly. You may have found yourself overthinking, doubting your direction, or feeling internally unsettled even when nothing outwardly had changed. This internal tension often created fatigue and uncertainty. Yet, gradually, something begins to shift. The conflict inside your mind becomes less intense. You still think deeply, yet your thoughts feel more aligned, more grounded, and less fragmented. Rebuilding confidence often begins by transforming the internal conversation you have with yourself. God does not only strengthen outward faith, He reshapes inward perception. When your inner dialogue becomes calmer, clearer, and more centered, it reveals that confidence is being restored beneath the surface. You begin to notice that your thoughts no longer spiral as before. Questions may still arise, but they no longer disturb your stability. Instead of internal conflict, a quiet conviction begins to guide you. This conviction is not loud certainty, it is steady assurance. There was a period in my own life when my thoughts felt constantly divided. I tried to trust, yet doubt continued to surface. I questioned whether I was moving in the right direction, whether I understood what God was doing, and whether my steps were truly guided. This internal conflict created emotional fatigue, but over time, something subtle changed. My thoughts became calmer. I noticed that instead of arguing internally, I felt more aligned. I did not gain complete clarity, but I felt less divided. That quiet alignment revealed that confidence was being rebuilt within me. God was not forcing certainty. He was forming conviction. Scripture often reflects this transformation of the inner mind. Those who grew in faith experienced moments of doubt and questioning, yet their inner life gradually became more unified. Their strength came not from eliminating all questions, but from developing steady conviction within uncertainty. Confidence rebuilt in this way becomes resilient because it is formed through internal alignment rather than external proof. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects cognitive integration and reduced mental fragmentation. When inner conflict decreases, mental clarity increases. The mind becomes less divided between opposing thoughts and more coherent in direction. This strengthens emotional stability because internal tension decreases. Instead of oscillating between belief and doubt, your inner state becomes steady and consistent. You may notice subtle signs of this rebuilding. Your thoughts feel calmer. You question without losing stability. Internal conflict becomes less dominant. You feel more aligned within yourself. This is not forced certainty, it is restoration. God is rebuilding your confidence by transforming your inner dialogue, shaping conviction where conflict once existed. As this inner alignment continues to deepen, another transformation begins to unfold. Your dependence on constant reassurance begins to decrease, and you start to move forward with quiet trust rather than needing repeated confirmation. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to strengthen your ability to trust without continuous reassurance. Another sign that God is rebuilding your confidence in Him appears when your dependence on constant reassurance begins to decrease. There was a time when you felt the need for repeated confirmation before feeling steady. You searched for signs, looked for immediate clarity, and often waited for visible reassurance before moving forward. Without it, uncertainty could create hesitation. Yet gradually, something begins to shift. You still seek understanding, but you no longer feel controlled by the need for constant reassurance. A quieter trust begins to guide your steps. Rebuilding confidence often means learning to stand without continuous confirmation. God does not always provide visible reassurance at every moment. Instead, He strengthens inner trust so that you can move forward even when clarity is incomplete. When your need for repeated signs begins to fade, it reflects deeper grounding. You begin to notice that you can continue without the same level of external validation. This is not blind movement. It is steady trust shaped through experience. There was a season in my own life when I constantly searched for confirmation. I felt uncertain about my direction and wanted reassurance before taking steps. Without visible clarity, I hesitated. Yet over time, something quietly changed. I began to notice that I could move forward even when reassurance was not immediate. I did not feel reckless. I felt steadier. That shift helped me understand that confidence was being rebuilt within me. God was not removing uncertainty completely. He was strengthening my trust so that I could continue despite it. Scripture often reflects this movement from dependence on reassurance toward steady trust. Many who walked with God did not receive constant confirmation, yet they continued with quiet confidence. Their strength came not from repeated signs, but from renewed trust. Confidence rebuilt in this way becomes durable because it is not dependent on continual reassurance. It becomes rooted in deeper conviction. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects increased internal stability and reduced reliance on external validation. When inner confidence strengthens, the need for repeated reassurance decreases. You become less dependent on external signals and more guided by inner steadiness. This strengthens resilience because your direction becomes less influenced by uncertainty and more grounded in trust. You may notice subtle signs of this rebuilding. You move forward with less hesitation. You feel less need for repeated confirmation. Trust begins to feel steady rather than conditional. This is not impulsive action. It is restoration. God is rebuilding your confidence by strengthening your ability to trust without constant reassurance, forming quiet steadiness within your inner life. As this quiet trust continues to deepen, another transformation begins to unfold. You begin to perceive past struggles differently, recognizing how they have shaped your faith rather than weakened it. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform your understanding of past difficulty into renewed spiritual strength. Another sign that God is rebuilding your confidence in Him appears when your perception of past struggles begins to change. There was a time when you looked back at difficult seasons and felt confusion, frustration, or even quiet disappointment. You may have wondered why certain experiences happened, why answers seemed delayed, or why some moments felt heavy and uncertain. Yet gradually, something begins to shift. When you look back now, those same experiences feel different. You begin to see strength where you once saw weakness, formation where you once saw struggle, and growth where you once saw confusion. Rebuilding confidence often involves transforming how you understand your own story. God does not waste the seasons that once felt difficult. When your perception changes, you begin to recognize that many of the moments you questioned were shaping something deeper within you. Instead of weakening your trust, those experiences quietly strengthened it. You may not have understood the process while living through it, but in reflection, clarity begins to emerge. Confidence grows when the past no longer feels like evidence of doubt, but evidence of formation. There was a season in my own life when I struggled to understand certain difficulties I faced. At the time, I felt uncertain and questioned what was happening. I could not see meaning in those moments, and I often felt that progress was unclear. But over time, through reflection and experience, my perception changed. I began to recognize how those very struggles had strengthened my faith and deepened my understanding. What once felt confusing began to feel formative. That shift helped me see that God was not distant during those seasons. He was shaping something within me. Scripture often reflects this transformation of perspective. Many who walked closely with God experienced periods of hardship and uncertainty, yet later recognized how those seasons strengthened their trust. Confidence rebuilt through reflection becomes stronger because it is rooted in lived experience. Instead of weakening belief, past difficulty becomes part of the foundation of renewed trust. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects narrative integration and meaning reconstruction. When the mind reinterprets past struggle as growth, emotional tension decreases and resilience increases. You begin to see continuity rather than fragmentation in your journey. This strengthens confidence because your story feels coherent rather than uncertain. Past difficulty becomes a source of strength rather than doubt. You may notice subtle signs of this rebuilding. You look back with more clarity than confusion. Past struggles feel meaningful rather than discouraging. You recognize growth where you once saw only difficulty. This is not denial of hardship, it is restoration of perspective. God is rebuilding your confidence by transforming how you understand your past, shaping renewed strength through reflection and insight. As this renewed understanding continues to deepen, another transformation begins to unfold. You begin to sense a quieter closeness with God, not based on emotional intensity, but on steady awareness. This leads to the next sign, where confidence is rebuilt through a deeper sense of spiritual connection and inner presence. Another sign that God is rebuilding your confidence in Him appears when your sense of connection with Him becomes quieter but deeper. There was a time when you may have associated closeness with strong emotion, visible answers, or clear signs. When those were present, you felt confident. When they were absent, you felt distant. Yet gradually, something begins to change. Your sense of connection no longer depends on emotional intensity. It becomes quieter, steadier, and more consistent. You may not always feel strong emotion, yet you feel less alone. A subtle awareness of His presence begins to remain with you even in ordinary moments. Rebuilding confidence often means moving from emotional dependence towards steady connection. God does not always communicate through intensity. Often, He strengthens awareness so that connection becomes grounded rather than fluctuating. When you begin to feel steady, even without emotional peaks, it reveals that confidence is being rebuilt at a deeper level. You are no longer relying only on feelings. You are growing in quiet assurance. There was a season in my own life when I believed that closeness to God should always feel strong and unmistakable. When that feeling faded, I questioned whether I had become distant. Yet over time, something subtle changed. I began to notice a quiet steadiness within me, even without strong emotion. I felt less alone, less uncertain, more grounded. I realized that God was teaching me that connection is not always loud. Sometimes it is steady, quiet, and deeply rooted. That understanding helped rebuild my confidence in Him. Scripture often reflects this deeper, quieter form of connection. Many who walked closely with God experienced seasons where emotion was not intense, yet their awareness of His presence remained steady. Their confidence did not depend on emotional experience, but on consistent connection. Confidence rebuilt in this way becomes durable because it is not shaken by emotional fluctuation. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects internalized security and stable attachment. When connection becomes steady rather than emotionally dependent, anxiety decreases and inner stability increases. You feel less alone and more grounded, even without external reassurance. This strengthens resilience because your sense of connection becomes consistent rather than conditional. You may notice subtle signs of this rebuilding. You feel less dependent on emotional intensity. You sense quiet steadiness rather than emotional fluctuation. Your connection feels calm and consistent. This is not emotional distance, it is restoration. God is rebuilding your confidence by deepening your sense of connection, forming steady awareness rather than temporary emotional peaks. As this deeper connection continues to grow, the final transformation begins to unfold. Your confidence begins to feel integrated into your life, shaping how you think, respond, and move forward. This leads to the final sign, where rebuilt confidence becomes a stable foundation within your inner life. The final sign that God is rebuilding your confidence in Him appears when trust becomes a stable foundation rather than a temporary feeling. There was a time when your confidence rose and fell with circumstances. When things went well, you felt secure. When uncertainty appeared, you felt shaken. Trust often depended on visible reassurance. Yet gradually, something within you has changed. Confidence no longer feels fragile, it feels grounded. You still face uncertainty, yet you remain steady. Trust is no longer a reaction, it has become part of your foundation. Rebuilt confidence reveals itself through stability. God often restores confidence not by removing every challenge, but by strengthening the inner life, so that trust remains even when circumstances shift. When confidence becomes integrated into how you think, respond, and live, it reflects deep restoration. You are no longer searching for reassurance constantly. You move with quiet conviction. This conviction is not loud certainty, it is steady trust that remains present even in uncertainty. There was a season in my own life when confidence felt unstable. I trusted, yet I was easily shaken. I believed, yet I often doubted. But over time, through reflection, struggle, and quiet formation, something changed within me. Trust became steadier. I no longer felt the same internal fluctuation. I did not suddenly gain complete clarity, but I felt grounded. That quiet grounding revealed that confidence had been rebuilt beneath my awareness. God had strengthened what once felt fragile, forming stability rather than temporary reassurance. Scripture often reflects this final stage of renewed trust. Those whose confidence was restored did not become free from uncertainty, but they became steady within it. Their trust was no longer conditional, it became part of their foundation. Confidence rebuilt through endurance becomes resilient because it is tested and formed rather than assumed. It becomes a source of steadiness rather than a response to circumstances. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects integrated security and internal stability. When confidence becomes foundational, emotional fluctuation decreases and resilience strengthens. You are less reactive to uncertainty and more grounded in steady trust. This stability allows you to face life with calm assurance rather than constant tension. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. Trust feels steady rather than fragile. You feel less shaken by uncertainty. Confidence feels natural rather than forced. This is not blind belief, it is restoration. God is rebuilding your confidence in Him by forming stable trust within your inner life, shaping a foundation that is not easily shaken. This message reflects my personal understanding of Scripture, shaped through life, reflection, struggle, and faith. Like many, I am still growing, still learning, and still walking this journey. My hope is that this message brings clarity, peace, and renewed strength to your inner life, helping you recognize that confidence is already being rebuilt within you. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to respond. Write in the comments what you learned, or share a simple declaration such as, "I choose to trust with steady confidence." Your words may strengthen someone walking through the same quiet restoration.